The cold hum of the galaxy hung in the air as the captain's voice crackled over the comms. "Prepare for hyperspace jump," Captain Elias Reynolds ordered, his voice calm but firm. The crew of the Endeavour, the United Earth Coalition's flagship, had heard this 1,000 times before. Yet today was different. Today, the galaxy was about to learn just how wrong it had been to underestimate humanity. Elias had spent his career fighting against a rising tide of alien arrogance, but he'd never imagined it would come to this. He leaned against the ship's command console, eyes narrowing as he studied the glowing stars. Outside the vessel, the stars in the distance slowly blurred, bending into streaks of light as the ship entered the folds of space. "Captain, the Galician fleet has deployed its forces," Lieutenant Ariana Diaz reported, her voice tense with urgency. The young officer, a genius in alien diplomacy, had been Elias's right hand for the past 4 years. She quickly tapped away at the console, bringing up the digital projection of the enemy forces, hundreds of ships that dwarfed humanity's fleet, a force unmatched by anything Earth had ever seen. "Do you think they'll listen?" Elias asked, his voice tinged with doubt. Despite the Endeavour's advanced technology and formidable crew, they were heading into a galaxy that saw humanity as little more than an afterthought. They'd warned the Galactic Council, pleaded with them for months. But the warning had been ignored. "They never listen," Ariana muttered, her gaze locked on the holographic map. "And now they'll regret it." She wasn't wrong. They had been dismissed as an insignificant force, primitive, they'd been called. But what the aliens didn't understand was the one thing that set humanity apart, their unyielding spirit. "We'll show them," Elias said, a spark of determination in his voice. "This fleet may be huge, but it won't make a difference." "Captain," Ariana interrupted, her hand hovering over a blinking light on her console. "They're changing course." Elias's stomach clenched. "What do you mean?" She turned her chair to face him, her face pale. "The enemy is targeting our fleet. They're preparing a strike." The words hung in the air like a countdown. He had to act. They had warned, they had pleaded, but now it was time to show the galaxy what humans could do. It wasn't about firepower. It wasn't about numbers. It was about what lay at the core of humanity: strategy, creativity, and the indomitable will to survive. "All hands to battle stations," Elias barked, his voice now a roar of command. The crew jumped into action, scrambling to their posts as the Endeavour prepared for the inevitable battle. Ariana stood beside Elias, gripping the console tightly. "We're outnumbered. But we've got one advantage." Her eyes flickered with something that wasn't fear, but determination. "We know how to win, even when the odds are impossible." Elias's mind raced. The Endeavour's quantum drive was cutting edge, and while their weaponry was formidable, it was their tactical genius that could turn the tide. He'd been trained by the best, and he trusted his crew implicitly. But this battle wasn't going to be won with brute force alone. He walked over to the holographic map, tapping at the digital interface. The enemy was closing in fast. But there was a flaw. They didn't anticipate humans thinking outside the box. "Initiate the countermeasure protocol," he ordered. Ariana's fingers flew across the console, and Elias watched as the crew initiated the high-stakes strategy they'd been preparing for months. It was risky, more than risky, but it was their only chance. If it worked, they could take out the alien fleet in a matter of moments. If it didn't, they'd be wiped out. "Ready when you are, Captain," Ariana said, her voice steady but her eyes betraying the tension she felt. Elias took a deep breath. "Do it." The stars outside seemed to fade as the Endeavour shifted into the next phase of the plan. The quiet before the storm was palpable, as the crew held their breath. Every second felt like an eternity. And then, as if the universe itself held its breath, the Endeavour blinked out of sight. In that fleeting moment, the Galician fleet, so vast and imposing, disappeared. Not a single shot was fired. Not a single scream was heard. The aliens, so confident in their victory, looked at their empty sensors and blinked in confusion. They had underestimated humanity in the most catastrophic way imaginable. "What the hell just happened?" an alien commander muttered, looking over his ship's crew in disbelief. The Endeavour was already on the other side of the fleet, its quantum drives engaging once more, sending it into the heart of enemy space. The countermeasure had worked, their fleet had vanished from the enemy's radar, hidden in a perfect blind spot. Ariana looked at Elias, her expression unreadable for a moment. What now? Elias's lips curled into a smile that wasn't just confidence, it was the knowing smile of a species that had just shown the universe that humanity could not be ignored. We fight, he said, his voice steady as the ship plunged into the unknown. And we win. The Endeavour floated silently in the void, the hum of its engines the only sound that could be heard in the otherwise sterile command deck. Captain Elias Reynolds stood at the helm, his hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the expanse of space before him. The battle had only just begun, but the magnitude of what they had set in motion weighed heavily on his mind. Ariana Diaz approached from the communications console, her expression tight with concern. Captain, we're on the radar now. The Galactic fleet has detected our re-entry. They'll be expecting us. Elias didn't flinch. He had known this would happen. They couldn't stay hidden forever. The countermeasure had bought them time, but time was running out. Prepare the fleet for immediate deployment. All ships are to lock into formation. We make our stand here. Ariana hesitated, then nodded, her eyes scanning the data streaming across the console. The enemy's warships are still out of range, but they're closing fast. Elias glanced over his shoulder at the display, showing the vast armada of the Galactic fleet. Their numbers were staggering, each ship bristling with weapons, their dark metallic forms sleek and menacing against the starry backdrop. But Elias wasn't intimidated. He had seen far worse. Humanity had faced insurmountable odds before, and each time, they had risen stronger. We've faced worse odds, he said, his voice low but resolute. We've got one chance at this. We take them down with precision. Sir, Ariana interrupted, her fingers dancing across the console. There's something strange. The fleet is splitting. A portion of them are moving off towards the dark edge of the system. Elias frowned. That wasn't part of the enemy's original strategy. The Galaxians were methodical, not prone to sudden, erratic movements. What were they up to? He turned back to Ariana. Keep an eye on those ships. We don't know what they're planning, but I have a feeling we'll find out soon enough. The tension on the command deck was palpable as the Endeavour and its fleet maneuvered into position. A small, elite group of ships, human-designed, faster and more agile than the cumbersome Galactic vessels, prepared to make the first strike. The air felt thick, each crew member on edge, aware that their every move could determine whether they lived or died. Ariana tapped her earpiece. Captain, I've just received a message from command. They've confirmed that the Galactic Council has issued a full assault order. They're coming for us, no holds barred. I figured as much, Elias muttered under his breath. The Endeavour was humanity's last hope. The galactic powers had abandoned them, and now, they would either prove their worth, or the stars would be a graveyard for human ambition. Captain, Ariana said, her voice sharp, there's something else. A new signal, originating from the Galactic flagship. It's coded. She hesitated. It's a threat. Elias turned slowly, his brow furrowed. What kind of threat? The kind that doesn't leave room for survival, Ariana replied, her face pale. They're targeting our homeworld. Earth. The words hit him like a physical blow, stealing the breath from his lungs. Earth, he echoed, his voice a low growl. They had dared to come for his people, his planet. The same species that had survived every hardship, every challenge the galaxy had thrown at them. The same humans who had built everything from scratch. You know what to do, he said, his voice ice-cold now. Ariana's eyes hardened. Ready the weapons systems. We'll make sure they regret underestimating us. The tension on the deck intensified as the crew scrambled to their stations. Elias felt the weight of the moment settle around him. His crew, his people, depended on him now. This was no longer about politics or alliances. This was about survival. About showing the galaxy that humanity would never be written off. They would fight with everything they had. Ariana's voice broke the silence once again. The first wave is here, Captain. They're within firing range. Elias didn't hesitate. Fire. The command was instantaneous. The Endeavour unleashed a barrage of missiles, the flares of their propulsion visible even in the vacuum of space. The enemy ships, so sure of their superiority, didn't even know what hit them. The missiles hit their mark with deadly precision, tearing through the first few Galactian warships. The shockwave reverberated across the fleet, and Elias saw a flicker of doubt in their ranks. The Endeavour had struck the first blow, and it had been devastating. Ariana's voice rang out again. We've destroyed 2 capital ships. The Galaxians are regrouping, but they're not retreating. They're sending reinforcements. The odds were stacking up against them, but Elias could feel something shift. They had shown the galaxy one undeniable truth: humanity was not to be taken lightly. He stepped forward, his face set in a mask of determination. Keep pushing. We've only just begun. The war was far from over. The Endeavour was about to prove that humanity's spirit would outlast even the might of the stars themselves. The Endeavour shuddered as another volley of fire tore through space. The Galactian fleet, far more formidable than anticipated, had regrouped quickly. The air inside the command deck crackled with tension as alarms blared, warning of incoming fire from the enemy. Captain Elias Reynolds stood at the forefront, his eyes locked on the digital displays, each flashing red as they highlighted the relentless approach of their foes. His crew was fighting with everything they had, but the numbers were overwhelming. Ariana, Elias called out, his voice cutting through the chaos, how much longer until reinforcements arrive? Ariana Diaz, the communications officer, glanced up from her console. Sweat dotted her brow, but her focus remained unbroken. 20 minutes, Captain, maybe less. But the Galaxians are moving faster than expected. They've accelerated their offensive. Elias clenched his jaw, his fingers brushing the cool surface of the command console. They were running out of time, and the Endeavour wasn't built to withstand the kind of firepower the enemy was throwing at them. Prepare the secondary defenses. I want all shields at full capacity. And make sure the torpedo systems are primed. We can't afford to miss. The ship lurched violently as another wave of enemy fire slammed into its shields. The feedback rattled the entire structure, and for a split second, Elias thought he might hear the groan of the hull. But the ship held. We're holding, Ariana confirmed, but there was no mistaking the underlying strain in her voice. The Galaxians weren't just attacking with brute force. Elias recognized the strategy: they were wearing them down, picking at their weaknesses and exploiting every gap. They were smart, methodical, and as far as Elias could see, they had no intention of retreating. How many ships did we lose? Elias asked, the question heavy on his tongue. Ariana hesitated, her fingers moving quickly across the screen, checking the latest reports. 4. 2 of them were key vessels. We can't afford another loss like that. Elias exhaled slowly. 4 ships. A blow, but nothing that would shatter their resolve. Not yet. He was determined to see this through. To prove that humanity would never fold under pressure, no matter how dire the situation. Keep pushing forward, Elias ordered. We're not backing down. He turned his attention to the view outside the window, where the enemy's massive warships loomed like shadowed giants, a reminder of how small they were in the grand scale of things. But that's where humanity excelled: small, but fierce. Small, but relentless. They had survived wars and devastation across centuries, and they were never one to back away from a fight. Ariana's voice snapped him out of his thoughts. Captain, we've got a transmission from command. They've confirmed the final phase of the counterattack. Reinforcements are en route, but there's a complication. Elias raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. What complication? Ariana's hands hovered above the controls. It's not just Galactian warships heading our way. The Council has dispatched their elite squadron. We're facing the best they've got. Elias clenched his fists, but his expression remained unreadable. The Council's elite, the Scions of Oblivion. The fiercest, most skilled warriors the galaxy had to offer. If they were coming, it wasn't just a battle. It was a statement. And it meant they were about to face the pinnacle of the Galaxian military might. He gripped the console, steadying himself as the Endeavor rocked again from another barrage. Ariana, I need you to get me a direct line to the fleet's commander. Now. The communication officer's fingers danced across the screen. Getting them now, Captain. Within moments, the face of Admiral Catherine Westmore appeared on the screen. Her expression was steely, calm despite the urgency of the situation. Her voice was strong and steady. Elias. We've got 30 minutes until the reinforcements arrive. But I'm afraid it may not be enough. The Scions are a threat we've never faced before. Elias met her gaze through the screen, his jaw set. We've faced worse. Westmore hesitated, but only for a moment. We're going to need you to hold them off. Do whatever it takes. We can't afford to lose the Endeavor. You're humanity's last chance. Elias felt the weight of those words sink into his chest. He had heard them before, but now, they carried a gravity that made his heart beat heavier in his chest. Humanity's last chance. If they failed now, the Galaxians wouldn't just destroy them, they would erase them from the galactic stage, and there would be no going back. I won't let you down, Elias said, his voice unwavering. We'll hold. You just get those reinforcements here. The connection flickered and cut off, leaving Elias in the dimly lit command deck, the hum of the ship's engines the only sound. He turned to Ariana, who was already in motion, organizing the fleet's defensive maneuvers. Captain, Ariana said, her voice low. I don't like the look of this. The Scions won't give up. They won't stop until we're annihilated. Elias nodded grimly. Then we fight like we've never fought before. The first wave of Scion ships entered visual range, their sleek forms a terrifying contrast against the backdrop of the stars. They were fast, deadly, and relentless. And they were coming for the Endeavor. The battle was about to reach its apex, and Elias knew the next few moments would decide everything. Brace yourselves, he ordered, his voice steady but urgent. This is where we make our stand. And as the enemy closed in, Elias couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Humanity was small, but it was never weak. And the Endeavor would show the galaxy just how far their resilience could go. The void of space outside the Endeavor was a terrifying stillness, a silence before the storm. The Scions of Oblivion closed in, their ships like sleek predators circling their prey, each one a harbinger of death. Elias Reynolds stood at the helm of the ship, his eyes fixed on the view screen, the tension palpable in the air. His crew was preparing for the worst, and deep down, he knew that the outcome of this battle would decide the fate of humanity. All stations report ready, Captain, Ariana Diaz said, her voice steady but with a hint of strain. We've got one shot at this. Elias nodded, his expression unwavering. He knew the stakes. If the Scions broke through, it wouldn't just be the Endeavor that fell, it would be the entire human fleet. And the galaxy would be forced to reckon with a truth no one had anticipated, humanity's tenacity. Deploy the decoy drones, Elias ordered, his voice crisp and commanding. We'll give them a taste of what they're up against. Ariana's fingers flew across the controls, and within moments, a swarm of drone ships shot into space, creating a web of shimmering false targets that would confuse the enemy's sensors. The Scions, notorious for their precision, would have to waste precious seconds scanning the drones for vulnerabilities. Time they didn't have. The first barrage from the enemy ships came fast and unforgiving, streaks of light flashing across the dark expanse. The Endeavor shuddered under the pressure, but the shields held for now. Shields at 75%, Ariana called, her eyes locked on the numbers flashing in red across her console. We can't keep this up much longer, Captain. We need those reinforcements. We'll survive until then, Elias said, more to himself than to anyone else. Keep the fire on them. Full power to the weapons. The Endeavour fired back, sending a volley of torpedoes streaking toward the incoming ships. The explosions that followed were like miniature suns, their light flaring in the cold expanse of space. But the Scions weren't deterred. They wove and dodged with deadly accuracy, their ships sleek and agile, designed for one purpose: destruction. "Captain," Ariana said, her voice sharp with urgency. "We've got a problem. The Scions are adapting. They've already found the weak points in our defenses." Elias' mind raced. He had anticipated this, but it didn't make the situation any easier. These were the galaxy's best warriors. There was no room for error. If they could exploit even the smallest weakness, they would tear the Endeavour apart. "Pull back the drones. Prepare to make a full assault," Elias commanded. He turned toward the tactical officer, Lieutenant Aria Wensley, who was staring at her console with intense focus. "What's the status on the torpedo array?" "We've got a few left, Captain," Aria replied, her hands flying over the controls. "But we're running out of options. The Science ships are closing in on our blind spots." Elias clenched his fists. They couldn't allow themselves to be cornered. "All hands, prepare for evasive maneuvers. This is going to get worse before it gets better." The ship rocked violently as another salvo from the Science struck the Endeavour, and the lights flickered briefly. The hull groaned in protest, but it held. "For now." "Captain," Ariana said, her eyes wide with alarm, "they're locking onto our engines." Elias' heart skipped a beat. The Endeavour couldn't afford to lose power. Without the engines, they would be sitting ducks, easy targets for the Scions. He was about to issue another order when a new voice interrupted. "Captain Reynolds, this is Admiral Westmore. Reinforcements are on their way. We're bringing the full fleet." The sound of the Admiral's voice was like a lifeline thrown into the abyss. But even with the fleet's arrival, the Scions were relentless, and there was no guarantee they would arrive in time. "We've got to hold on just a little longer," Elias said, his voice a low growl of determination. "Ariana, patch me into the comms. I need to speak with my crew." "Done," she replied quickly. Elias took a deep breath and looked around at the faces of his crew, their expressions filled with the same determination he felt. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about proving that humanity, against all odds, could rise above the overwhelming might of the galaxy's most feared warriors. "This is Captain Reynolds. I won't lie to you. The Scions are some of the deadliest beings we've ever faced, and right now, we're outnumbered. But we've fought wars before. We've survived plagues, famines, and disasters that should have wiped us from existence. We've always found a way to keep going. And we will again. We are humanity, and we do not surrender." The crew let out a unified cheer, their spirits lifted by his words. It was all they needed, a reminder of the fire that burned within them. A massive explosion rocked the ship as the Science fire hit again. The Endeavour spun dangerously, throwing everyone off balance. But the crew held steady, determined to keep the ship intact. Then, just as the Scions closed in for the final strike, the stars outside the windows erupted in a blaze of light. A swarm of human warships appeared, cutting through the darkness like a wave of vengeance. The reinforcements had arrived. Elias' heart surged with hope. But the fight was far from over. "All hands," he shouted, "prepare for the final charge. Let's show the galaxy what humanity can do." As the Endeavour and its allies surged forward, Elias knew this was it, the moment that would define humanity's place in the universe. The storm had come, and humanity wasn't backing down. The battle was just beginning.